Bo Landin is the producer, director, and screenwriter for Learning from Light, the Vision of I.M. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to be here in DC and screen this film here.
I'm going to ask you just to tell us a little bit about your film.
Well, it was a project that started just by chance, really, when I visited Qatar a couple of years ago, and I saw they were building the Museum of Islamic Art, and I said, are you documenting this? This is a fantastic place. It's going to be an amazing museum, and after all, it is an I.M. building. And they said, no, we didn't think about that. And I said, I think you should produce a film. And they came back to me and said, well, then you do it. And that's how it started. And it became, for me, almost 4-year journey into Islamic architecture, Islamic culture and traditions, and the life of I.M. And he sort of was the master that took me on this journey. And it has been an amazing trip.
Did you know I.M. before, or were you an admirer?
Not at all. Well, I knew of his work, but my background as a documentary filmmaker, I'm a biologist. So I'm doing science films and wildlife films and adventure films from around the world, and had not really been thinking about Islamic architecture for a second before I met him. But once you meet him, he's such an enthusiastic person, and he got me interested. And as a filmmaker, you know, we are open, our eyes and ears are open to the world. And when we see things, we hear things, we meet interesting people, then it's all about storytelling. The subject can be almost whatever, but this interests me a lot. So that's how we told the story.
Can you tell me, do you think American audiences or audiences worldwide will learn something different or surprising about the architectural process, the creative process?
Yeah, to get inside the mind of a great personality like I.M. will always teach you something. It taught me a lot. And I think it taught him a lot. Because I am the kind of reporter that normally says that I have to question authority. That's how I find the answers to my questions. And I'm not going to be satisfied until I have understood. So I actually question him and many times on his opinions and his thoughts, and that we developed a very interesting relation where he knew he couldn't just say something to me because he has always said it that way, because I would question why he said it, why he came to that conclusion. And that's my way of working as a filmmaker, and I think it worked with this film as well. And yes, you will learn something new, because I think people, maybe especially here in the United States, have a preconceived notion of what the Middle East and the Arab world is. It is a big part of the world. And as we say in this film, the Islamic world stretches from the Atlantic, from Cordoba in Spain to Samarkand, across half of the earth. And there are so many differences in cultures over centuries, over geographical regions. There are many different peoples, but it is the Islamic faith that holds it all together. Or as I.M. says, what holds it together is the sun. It's the sun belt. And that's why the Islamic architecture is a reaction to the sun.
Well, this was just amazingly gorgeous. The soundtrack is beautiful. You learn a lot about Pei in the process, and the design of the building, the insight that goes into creating the building itself. Those are things I didn't know anything about, so the whole film was a real delight.
Did you learn anything surprising about I.M.
No, I was familiar with I.M. work, but his enthusiasm, his vision for the future, even at the age of 92, and his love of geometry and simplicity in architectural form. I had known this before, but I understood it much better after this movie.
Do you come to Filmfest DC often?
You know, this is my first time to the film festival, but it was just an awesome opportunity, and there was, I have to say, really hard to choose which one to go to.
Ritu Sarin and Tenzing Sonam are directors of The Sun Behind the Clouds. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
Nice to be here.
Can you tell me, how did this film come about?
We've been making films about Tibet for over 20 years, and the 50th anniversary of the fall of Tibet was coming up, and we decided it was a very important juncture to look at the situation in Tibet and to look at the future of the Tibet movement. We thought it was a very, very important thing to do, and that's how we embarked on this film.
What are some of the most important points that you think your audience will take away?
I think the prime thing that the audience is going to take away is they're going to hopefully understand how complex the Tibet situation is. It's not a clear-cut black and white issue. There is some kind of debate and discussion going on within the Tibetan community about how the struggle should go on into the future, and hopefully that will come across in the film. I think there are a number of moments in the film that at least to us was really kind of inspiring. One is a scene in Tibet when the Chinese finally allowed a group of journalists to come into Lhasa on a kind of a controlled tour to show them that the situation was under control and everything was normal. And all of a sudden, these monks suddenly like burst out and started weeping in front of the camera and telling the camera, at great risk to their own safety, of course, because they were all going to be arrested afterwards, that the situation was actually not as normal as it seemed, that it was actually really bad, and that they wanted freedom and they wanted the Dalai Lama to come back to Tibet, all of which are incredibly inflammatory in Tibet, to openly speak out. So I think that was one of the really inspiring moments for us, because that showed us that the title of the film is "The Sun Behind the Clouds," and it's from a song, a resistance song, which says that if Tibetans unite, then one day the sun will emerge from behind the clouds. The sun in this case refers to the Dalai Lama coming back to Tibet and to Tibetan freedom. So hopefully, even though it's a very depressing subject, it will leave the viewer with some sense that there is still hope.
I'd like to ask you both, what did you get from the experience of making this movie?
I think each time a film works, when you show it to an audience, they are moved and changed by it, and I think that is what finally we get out of it, that we feel like we can make a difference, because every person we move and change will hopefully take it on themselves to do something for the larger cause.
Dan Sturman is producer, director, and screenwriter for Soundtrack for a Revolution. Welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a bit about your film?
It tells the story of the American Civil Rights Movement through the freedom songs. These are songs that activists themselves sang when they were in demonstrations, when they were in mass meetings, when they were thrown in jail. Songs that helped. I think the film. I find it very moving in many parts. I personally, we used music to tell the story, and I think the idea behind using music was that we were trying to appeal to people's heart as much as their mind, and so. I think the performances in the film, which are done by people like John Legend and Wycliffe Jean and the Blind Boys of Alabama, and I just feel like they really, really, make people, feel what happened 40 years ago. We interview a range of generals and foot soldiers. On the one hand, we talk to people like John Lewis and Andrew Young and Julian Bond. These are people who've, spoken on this topic very extensively. And, John Lewis I could listen to all day. On the flip side, we interview all these people who were really on the front lines, and who didn't get a lot of press or, have never been heard from. There's one woman named Linda Lowry who was 14 years old when she crossed the bridge at Selma. She was beaten by police, ended up getting like 30 stitches in her head.
Why did you become a filmmaker, and what does filmmaking give you back?
Documentary work is always an inspiration. It's an opportunity to go to places that you wouldn't normally go to, and to meet people that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise come into contact with, and to tell stories that ultimately I hope, will move people. I certainly hope this film does.